Hello and welcome to episode 78 of Communicast, the podcast dedicated to enhancing communication skills. I'm your host, Scott D'Amico, president of Communispond. Today I'm joined by Ksenia Zaykova, Chief Communications Officer at AngelsDeck Global Ventures and founder of Node Communications. Ksenia is renowned for her strategic approach to communications. In our conversation today, we'll explore the pivotal role of active listening, the importance of audience awareness, and the influence of empathy on effective communication. Let's dive in. Ksenia, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, and thank you for having me here.
My pleasure. Looking forward to our conversation. To get things started, why don't you tell the listeners just a little bit about you, your career journey, and the exciting work that you're doing today?
Sure. So my name is Ksenia Zaykova. I'm a founder of Not Communications, and I'm a Chief Communications Officer at AngelsDeck Global Ventures. So over the last decade, I've been working closely with the companies from B2B, tech, and venture capital sectors, which kind of gave me a 360-degree view of how to build communication between those two worlds. But when you're working so closely with both startup founders and investors, it's impossible not to notice that female founders are highly underrepresented, are not enough represented in this field. Also, working with female founders and advise them on strategic communication and how to overcome the communicational barriers that they are facing.
Outstanding. Yeah, that's definitely something that we hear a lot about, a big issue in the tech company and the VC world with getting that representation. And I would imagine, and I would say very broadly speaking, we see this a lot with founders, especially founders in tech companies, where really good at the technical side of things. They have the tech skills down pat when it comes to communicating. And I think specifically being able to communicate maybe to a non-tech audience, or to really take what they're doing and putting it into a very clear and compelling vision and being able to communicate that out to others, it can be a challenge sometimes. Like sometimes they're just so focused on the tech, communicating it out can be hard. And so as you think about it, and from your experience and what you've seen of different founders and different people throughout your career, what would you say makes somebody to be a great communicator, whether it's communicating their business up on stage or just day-to-day life? When you hear that somebody is a really strong communicator or a great communicator, what's that mean to you?
So I think that when I personally hear that someone is a great communicator, I keep thinking about like a complex skill set. So it's not just about delivering a message, but it's also about being able to truly listen and understand the person on the other side or the audience that you're trying to communicate to. So it's also like how you can navigate the stereotypes and biases while staying true to yourself and remaining confident and being true to the agenda that you own. And it's so complicated because it contains so many different elements. Like it's all about nonverbal cues, it's about your presentation skills, it's about being able to adapt to different audience and many other elements. So a great communicator to me knows how to balance it all to influence the outcomes that he or she wants to get out of this communication.
Absolutely. Yeah. When you think of communication, and I say this a lot, I think people oftentimes take for granted all that goes into effective communication. That's a big distinction there, right? Between communication and effective communication. Lots of people can get up on a stage and deliver a message or pick up the phone and talk to somebody, but really to make it effective and to be memorable. And as you mentioned, focused in on that audience, staying true to yourself and being able to get your message away and get your message across in a way that maintains your integrity, but then also is really tailored to that specific audience, is a hard skill. Unfortunately, it can be taught. It takes lots of practice, but it is something where there's so many facets of it that I think a lot of times people just don't even think about.
True. I think I'm a little bit on a different side than you are here because I'm more on a listening side. And
Mhm.
because, for example, like delivering a message is important, But to me, how you deliver the message will depend on what you heard from the person you're talking or the audience you're performing in front of.
100%. Listening is such a critical part of that. And if I think of listening, and you could look at it from a sales perspective. So if I'm in a sales meeting, I'm listening to what the other person is saying. For me, the listening starts before, and I would lump somewhat of preparation and research into that listening mode so that I'm understanding what this industry is facing, what challenges this person may be up against, what's going on in their organization. Then I'm listening with my eyes to pick up on the body language and the cues, the tone, the nonverbal stuff, how fast they're speaking, what they're talking about. Are they numbers driven? Are they people driven? So if you start to take in all of these things, it's going to help, I think, paint a little bit of a picture for who this person is, what motivates them, what drives them. And then in turn, the great communicators can adapt. They can realize, oh, I'm
Exactly.
talking with somebody that is a bottom line driver. I need to cut my message, cut my presentation, whatever it is, in half and just focus on these 2 or 3 points versus painting the lofty vision. They don't care about that, right? So I need to be able to focus in on what is important to this person and then in real time be able to adapt to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
With the work that you're doing, you're working with lots of founders and VCs, and we're just kind of across the spectrum. What are some of the key skills that are important in this industry when it comes to, say, the soft skills side or the communication skills side?
It's funny that we just literally talked about this. In my experience, the most important skill is being able to adapt to the person you're talking to or to the audience you're interacting with. And I actually like have a very, very practical reason for that because we live in an era of information overload, right? So if you don't know something, you just go online, you look for it, you find your answer, and then you implement it. For example, if you're a startup founder and let's say first time startup founder and you're not sure how to pitch your company to investors, then you would just go online, you would look for the guide how to pitch to investors 101, and there would be like a list of recommendations, which is great, which is
Mhm.
super useful and all insightful and all that. However, it kind of like, in my opinion, in terms of communication, it narrows down the space you're operating at. And I can give the exact example. Like most of the guides would say that you have to be very passionate about your company, about your project. You have to translate this confidence being almost, fiery. And we can
Mhm.
actually, like, we can see that in startup founders whenever they're pitching. So they try to be very, you know, um, I don't even know how to explain it. They just have this energy, and you're like, whoa, there's so much passion happening in here, which is great. However, the social research has shown that investors actually prefer more cold and calm confidence rather than the fiery one. And the reason is super simple. It's like we're living in very uncertain times where they want to give the money to the founders that would be able to adapt to any situation happening without losing
Mhm.
their mind and being confident and strategic and knowing where they're actually going. So, and this is like I see this all the time. Like I have I get so many pitches every single day, and 9 out of 10 are on the fiery, passionate side, and only one is more like has this calm demeanor. So it's so getting back to your question, it's like when you're being able to adapt to the situation, whoever you're talking to, or making your research and knowing that okay, here I should translate my passion and confidence because I'm speaking to potential consumers, let's say. And of course here you kind of like you want to project this confidence to them and proving them that your your product or your company is doing like is great. But when you're talking to investors here, you have to adapt to them. Like if they prefer someone who is more on a colder side, on a confident but colder side, then you should adapt to this. And I think this is like very important. And sometimes people do really ignore that because they adopt one communication style and ignore everything else.
Yeah, and I would think in that world, there's lots of information publicly available to know if I'm going into this VC, this fund, and I'm pitching, I could likely find out what other companies they've invested in. And I could look at those companies, I could look at their founders and probably find video of that person presenting or how they are. And you might be able to find a trend of these are the types of founders that this company is investing in. Some of it might be that hoorah halftime speech, big fiery presenter. May see other funds are presenting in kind of that cool, calm demeanor type of person. So really goes back to that listening and that research. If you can understand what do they want, and if you don't know that, you can't find that when you get in the room, you can usually get a sense from once you get started. And that's why being so prepared and going into it and knowing that I know my information well enough. I haven't necessarily memorized it word for word, but I know it well enough so that I can focus in on my audience and see, am I losing them? Do I need to tone it up a couple notches? Do I need to bring it down a couple of notches? Because when you're starting to pay attention to the audience, you'll pick up on their nonverbal cues, obviously how they're reacting to you physically. You can also pick up on just those verbals, the types of questions that they're asking. What are they focusing on? Are they focusing on vision? Are they focusing on the numbers? I've read lots of stories where investment companies, they're really investing in that person. The
Oh
idea
yeah.
is solid, but they're investing in that person. As you mentioned, they don't want to have to deal with 1,000 headaches a day. They want somebody that's going to be able to ride the storm, so to speak. I've never founded a company, but I can imagine it is just pure chaos and stress and anxiety and so much to do. So they're going to be looking at that, and I think your presentation style can somewhat project how you will be able to react in these types of situations.
Exactly. And you probably, out of all the people you know, that whenever you are giving a presentation or pitching or anything, whenever you're like having this interaction with the audience, your energy level has to match their energy level. So if they're all tired and calm, there is no reason to be like, hey, let's do that, folks. Yeah. So this is very important to kind of like observe and adapt.
Mm-hmm. And the key point there is you can still adapt and be true to yourself. If you are that fiery person, you can still tone it down a couple notches and really be true to yourself and have your passion come across. If you are kind of more of a even keeled, level type of person, you can dial it up a couple notches. I fall more on that side when I'm speaking and presenting, is I'm not that hoorah football coach trying to get people fired up presenter. I'm more going to focus on, even keel, understand what's important to my audience. But in certain situations, I realize I might need to amp it up a couple of notches, but I'm still able to stay true to myself when I do that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's actually this is very important. So whenever we're talking about adapting something, we're not saying that someone should be inauthentic to themselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because authenticity is the key, and I think like there's so many information about this as well. Because like you cannot build credibility or trust or anything else without being authentic to yourself. However, like you can be authentic, but you still can adapt to the audience you're communicating with. So it's kind of like it just takes some time to figure out how to do that. But it's a skill, right? You can train it.
You can absolutely train it. Takes just understanding what to do, how to do it, and then lots and lots and lots of practice. Spot on.
Exactly.
So as you think about your career journey, if I were to ask someone close to you, what was the key communication skill that has led to your success? What might they share with me?
Oh, I would say that being an active listener, I know we talked about this a lot already, but seriously, it is what it is. I'm
Mhm.
actually like, I'm more on the empathy side. So it's kind of like natural to me.
Mhm.
I'm a listener by nature. But so I don't have to put too much effort into this. But I think that when you can hear, when you can actually listen to another person and you kind of gain insights of what do they do, like how do they prefer to be communicated to, right? How do they prefer to interact, whether they lean towards formal or informal tone, all these things you can actually adapt how you deliver your message, which is great. So once you understand your audience preferences, you can tailor how you communicate with them. And I think this helped a lot throughout my career, just because, each and every client I've been working with are different. They
Mhm.
all have different communication styles. Some of them prefer to be, very bossy in all the aspects, and you have to learn how to adapt to that if you really want to work with them. And some of them give you more freedom in how you handle their PR and communication subjects. So it just kind of like, at first I think I was very, like, when I was younger in my 20s, I was very opinionated about how processes should have been. But I think I've worked really hard on being an active listener. And when I learned how to actually listen and hear what my clients are saying, like, my career went up.
Yeah, I would say most people are going to find a direct relationship between an improvement in their listening skills and an improvement in their career outcomes, whatever that career field may be. And for me, listening is something that is challenging to do well because there are so many things you need to prepare for when it comes to listening. So if I have an important conversation coming up, whether it is a client meeting, it's one of these podcast recordings, a one-on-one with somebody on my team, a big project we're working on. There's a lot of things I'll think about before having that conversation. Part of it maybe is, am I in the mindset for this conversation right now? Can I actually put my whole heart into this, my whole brain into this, and really listen? Or is it, for example, this week, Monday was just an absolute chaotic day. By the end of the day, my brain was spent. I had nothing left in the tank. If I would have had an important conversation, say at 4 or 5 o'clock, I would have rescheduled it because I knew I would not have been as powerful or as useful as I could have been in that conversation. So that's one thing. It's kind of thinking about, am I in the mindset for it? The other thing is, have I really prepared myself in a way where I'm not going to be distracted? So it could be early in the morning, whatever, but have I turned my phone off? Have I done all these things to make sure that, yep, you have me for the next 30 minutes, whatever it may be? So you have to start to think about, do I have this mindset? Do I have this environment where I can listen? Have I prepared so that I can listen? If I'm going into a client meeting, I want to have done my research. I want to understand them, their business, their industry. I want to have prepared maybe a half dozen questions that I would like to ask. I know how I'm going to kick the meeting off so that when they're talking, I'm not worrying about what I'm going to say next. I'm not worrying about what I'm going to ask next because I know I have things prepared. I can truly lock in on them. So there's all these things that really do go into listening that if you want to really improve those skills and do well with it, you need to put in some legwork for it.
Exactly, because you cannot deliver the message without actually doing the like everything that you just mentioned. Because, like, you can be as persuasive as you can be, but if you haven't done your research, and if you hadn't prepared your questions, and you hadn't listened to the person you are talking to, like, this message is just going to land nowhere,
Mhm.
literally. Because, like, it's kind of, I mean, I think this is a cheesy metaphor, but it's the same with gardening, right? If you prepare the soil, the seeds grow faster. If you don't do the work to prepare the soil, then you don't get any outcome out of this.
Yeah, that's absolute great way to work it. Have you fertilized? Have you tilled it up? Do you have the seeds in at the right depth based on how they should be planted? The sunlight, all that stuff. I am terrible with those types of things, with gardening, with getting the right types of flowers and the right types of light and watering. I never get it right. But when it comes to communication, spot on. You really have to prepare the soil in order to be able to reap the benefits, sow the benefits of it, so to speak, come time.
True.
As you think about your communication style, or this idea, this being very empathetic, focusing in on active listening and what's important to the other person in that conversation, who has been someone from throughout your career or throughout your life that has had an influence on your communication style? And maybe it's just one little thing you took from them and made it your own, but who's been someone that's had an influence on you?
I think I would go with Jonna Berger and Vanessa Van Edwards. And there's so many great influencers and opinion leaders and public speakers in the field that you and I are working at. However, um, what is special about these two people that I mentioned is that they're legitimate scientists. And I think what I got from how they communicate with their audiences is that, you know, I this is the influence of my job. I like to do my fact checking. So what I adopted from them is, to always support whatever I'm saying, to back up what I'm saying with the numbers or researches, because in the end, like, I'm not just advising on how to build strategic communication or public relations or anything like that. I'm trying to provide evidence-based solutions that can actually make an impact. And you cannot do this just out of nowhere. You have to rely on something. And thanks God, again, we're living in the era of information overload. You can find all the researchers that you need. You can check which suits you the best in what situation. And then you can actually create something beautiful and impactful out of it.
Yeah, that's a good point about really supporting the ideas and plans with the facts and the numbers. That's what makes it ultimately concrete for people, and especially if you're dealing with founders, right? This is their thing. They've created it. They're going to be very passionate about it, very protective of it. And if you take that out from, just working with founders to say on a sales side, you're working with a client, you know, I always talk to my team about when a client is bringing us in, they've never worked with our organization before, and they're bringing us in to train some of their executives. Oftentimes, they could be putting their job or their career on the line by recommending us and bringing us in. So we need to make sure that we are able to provide them not only with the plan, but support it with stats, statistics, figures, and research to say, here's why it's going to work. Here's how it's going to work. Here's the impact that you'll see. And here's several examples of how it actually did work in a similar situation. So it's knowing that when you're dealing with an audience, I don't know if risk is the right word to say, but what's the risk that they're facing by working with us, right? So if they're trying to bring you in from a strategic communications and PR perspective, what's the risk if this goes wrong, right? If somebody's bringing us to train executives, what's the risk to them or their organization? And then figure out, how do you help to alleviate and bring those risks down? You obviously do it by asking questions, ideally listening to their responses, and then formulating your plan based on that.
Exactly. Well, I find that, when people are doing something for some time, for example, like founders who are working on their projects, they have like a tunnel vision, right? Because they all are so focused on what they're doing, and it's
Mhm.
a little bit complicated for them to see a situation or um, a problem from a different angle. And this is where you, as a communication specialist, have has to know how to operate with different numbers or researches, because you have to know what happened in this situation with this company, or in this situation with within this research. And so you can come up with the idea being like, hey, let's try this and this out, because this might work, or it probably should work, but it might not as well. But at least we're trying something, like we're testing the uh, different options. Let's see which one works and which one not. But I am suggesting these options because I know that it already has worked for some people, and this is their research that can back it up.
Absolutely. Yeah, having those case studies, having those examples is important. And as we've talked about, over the past 20 some minutes, this idea of effective communication ultimately can help kind of take those blinders off, so to
Yeah,
speak, when you have somebody that really is tunnel visioned, to get them to think maybe a little bit differently, to open up to new ideas and see how it can impact the entire organization or the entire project, things like that. So I think bringing these strong communication skills in really can help people to maybe step back, open the aperture a little bit, and take a broader view of things. As we're
absolutely.
wrapping up here, what piece of closing advice would you have for folks listening to this, really just around the importance of developing the skills that we talked about today and ultimately the impact that it can have on their career?
I think it will be no surprise for for the listeners, but I think I would respond with a quote by Malcolm Forbes, who said that the art of conversation lies in listening rather than in talking. And I think that active listening is just as important as any other soft skill that people are working at. Because just trying to actually listen to what the other person, or I don't know, many people are saying can bring you so many insights and can actually kind of like, you know, help you to figure out how to respond in a more effective way. And obviously, I would encourage anyone who is working in the communication field is actually to work on this active listening skill and include it in the skill set because it has been a game changer for me. And I know that it helps to build credibility and trust and be much more effective in your communication.
Absolutely agree there. And when you really hone this skill, it's fascinating the things that you will pick up on that you otherwise would have missed. And I've been in meetings before where sometimes it's a small little throwaway comment that somebody makes, but because you're really listening and you've prepared, it triggers something and then it opens up a whole new world of opportunity. So when you are able to go into a meeting, really focus in on the other person, how you can help them, what's important to them, you're listening, you're not thinking about what you're going to say next, you're not thinking about your next question, you're not just waiting for them to stop talking so that you can respond. When you truly are listening, it provides you so many more opportunities to be able to figure out how can I help you. So spot on. Thank you so much for joining me today. Really, really enjoyed the conversation. If folks want to connect with you, learn a little bit more about the work that you're doing, what is the best way for them to do that?
I'm available on LinkedIn. I think this is
Perfect.
like the best platform where people can connect. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'll be sure to put a link to your profile in the show notes, and feel free to reach out and connect. I hope you have a great day, and thank you again for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
A special thanks again to my guest, Ksenia Zaykova. Ksenia's insights on tailoring your message based on audience feedback were incredibly enlightening. It's astonishing how powerful listening can be in shaping impactful communication. As we close this episode, remember that mastering communication is a continuous journey. Make sure to stay connected with Communicast by subscribing so you can benefit from conversations with future guests. If you found value in today's episode, I'd be grateful for your support. Leaving a rating or review is a fantastic way to let us know the impact this show has had on you. Thanks, and have a great day.